end. Helen or someone actually recording, someone's set record for me. I can't see the functionality, so I'm hoping that it's being recorded. Done it. Thanks, Helen. Well done. Thank you for my team in the background. You've probably found that you've been muted just because there's lots and lots of us on here at the moment, well over 100 at the moment. So we've had to mute and probably turn videos off, but so we're recording it and we'll
Lucinda, you've gone on mute.
Thank you, Helen. Can you hear me again now?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Don't know how I managed to do that. It was very clever. So my name's Lucinda. Interested, have you joined one of my webinars before? Because we've been running a lot of them over the last 6 months. Interested in that. If you have, you've seen this slide or similar before. If you haven't, just a very brief introduction. My background is learning and development professional. I'm also a psychologist. I'm the founder and CEO of Actus Performance Management Software. So that's the format through which we're delivering this. And most of our podcasts and webinars are all about people management, HR. It's all about adding value out there and supporting you guys in an incredibly challenging environment that we're all working in. I mentioned the podcast, the HR Uprising Podcast. I can see that I've got lots of line managers on here as well, which is great. If you're not aware of this, we've got a whole series of people management podcasts going out at the moment, one every week on a Wednesday. We'll put links out to you so that you can access those, and also the ebook. So we'll send you out an ebook on virtual people management and also links to the podcast episodes that would be very relevant to you if you're a line manager. If you want to know about change, that's one of my specialist areas, and mum of two and back to netball. I went back to netball last week, which is really nice. Let's hope we can keep it there. So thanks ever so much for joining. You can see all my LinkedIn. It's actually, do feel free to join us on LinkedIn, link in with me. We'll post these sort of things in the chat so that you can join up or join our LinkedIn group as well. So the points on this webinar, what we want to cover. The purpose of this is really to help understand why well-being needs to remain high on the workplace agenda, or possibly become even higher. Also, if you're a line manager, have a think about how can you spot concerns about well-being early. In this virtual environment, it's really tricky because people show their challenges in different ways, so we'll talk about how we can do that, and I'll try and give you lots of practical tips how to optimize well-being for both yourself and in your team. So when we're talking about good mental health or well-being, what are we really talking about? And this is really, really important because I think over the years there's been sort of a stigma attached sometimes talking about mental health, and really that shouldn't be the case, because the reality is it's something that we all have. We have good, bad or indifferent or fluctuating mental health, and it's natural for it to fluctuate in line with circumstances, in line with diets, in line with and the environment that we're in, and also in line with the time of year. If we've got good mental health, we're going to make the most of our potential, we're going to cope with what life throws at us, and we're going to be able to be happier, basically, play a full part in our relationships, workplace, and have a sense of purpose. Of course, the opposite is also true. If our mental health is fluctuating, that will impact on every single area of our life. And from the point of view of employees, it's going to actually really affect us in terms of our ability to be productive, right? So in this whole environment, as line managers, we want to support people to be productive. If they're productive, they're easier to manage, they're happy, the business is happy. And so it's very much worthwhile us taking this seriously. A lot of it for me is about recognizing when something isn't right and nipping things in the bud. I share an example here that my sister doesn't mind me sharing, I don't think. My sister struggles with mental health issues. She has anxiety and depression on occasions, and she's had extended issues for a period of time. And she's well, she's working now, but she's been through a lot of experience on this, and she's really learned a number of tools where she's been through things like cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of the analogies that she shared with me, which I felt really resonated, was the first few times that she had let's say a depressive episode, it was like walking along and not seeing a big black hole, and then before she knew it, she was stuck in the bottom of it and there was no way of climbing out. It took months of work to get out of it, and maybe drug therapy. But as she's got more experienced and alert to it, she's now almost become aware of like a set of traffic lights that exist around the edge of that black hole. And although she becomes closer and closer to it on occasion, she's got the tools now to recognize and divert around it. So for me, mental health for us as individuals is about us being aware of the potential to drop into that black hole and to be able to navigate around it, but also helping our staff do the same thing. And it's about prevention rather than waiting until it's too bad. These stats are pre-COVID. I feel like there's now going to be forever in our lives a sort of PC as opposed to BC, before COVID, pre-COVID. So the pre-COVID stats, even before we had what we've been through and what we're going to continue to go through over the next 6 months, was a very common mental health disorder. 7.8% of people met the criteria for diagnosis, so other people would still have had low level. Now, at the time, that was estimated to create a fifth of days lost from work in Britain. And reality is that one in 6 of us, so we have got 167 people so far on this webinar. So that would say, I can't do the maths, about 30 of us on here would have had a common mental health disorder. So it's really common and there should really be no stigma. These are sort of things that people would report stress. So it might be depression, it might be anxiety. And you know, if you're feeling depressed or anxiety, it's hard to be productive and to operate at a high level. There's more serious symptoms that we're seeing here around self-harm and suicidal thoughts, and of course stress. Many of us are feeling stressed, and that can also impact in terms of they're saying loneliness. So both of those, you can see where people are having to work remotely, if they're isolated, that could also impact on them. So just you can read the fear point for yourself, but the other point I draw your attention to is worries about employment, and this is pre-COVID. This is pre all of the redundancies and businesses having to furlough. Even then, 1 in 5 people were worried about their employment, and a third were concerned about losing their jobs. So there's plenty of worries going on, and those are worries which are going to be representative across all the many businesses that we've got on here. And thank you for so many of you sharing, which are some really interesting businesses here, such a diverse group. You can see and maybe link in with colleagues on here. Appreciate you joining. But when we think about our organisations, no one is immune to having mental health issues. It's not something we should stigmatise. And if those are the pre-COVID stats, what do we think they might look like now? That's a rhetorical question, I dread to think. However, we like to make this interactive, so let's just turn this on to ourselves, because I think it's always good to think about things from our own point of view, because then we can think out to others. This is about lockdown, so reflecting back on that, because I know officially we're out of lockdown. If you were to think about your own mental health, there's a poll that's come up here. We'll just turn off the mute sound. Thank you for muting there. Would you say, and you can choose one of these, would you say your mental health improved during lockdown, was much the same as usual, i.e. healthy during lockdown? Or are you someone that actually is challenged by it sometimes? By the way, I can't see who's saying what. It's completely anonymous. Was it less healthy, but that's normal for you? Did it fluctuate or did it decline? So let's see what you thought. And keep going, guys. Well done. We're just over 50% of voters on there. I'll let it go to 70. That's it, flying through them. Brilliant stuff. A few more answers. They're anonymous, so don't worry. It's just interesting to see what you all said. And then let's say, I think we'll end the polling now. So what we're seeing here, and actually my team, can you snapshot that? Because sometimes we can't get them. It's quite useful to be able to share with the guys afterwards, isn't it? It doesn't always come out on the recording, the snapshot. So if you grab a screenshot for us, Caitlin, please. You can see that some people's mental health improved during lockdown. That's interesting. I'd love to know if you thought yours did. Why was that? Was that about not having to commute or less pressure? Others, it was about the same. So you're usually quite healthy. Other people about the same, slightly less healthy, which is, we've got 5%, which is about the same as the statistics we had on here. And almost 50% found it went up and down, but ended up you're able to pick yourself up. and 13% it actually declined during lockdown. So these are really consistent with the results we've had on previous polls. So you can see that our mental health is fluctuating. Some people's mental health was declining, and I mean I'll talk about this later into what the impact might be as we go into autumn, into winter, because I feel that that makes a difference. So just carrying on here. So James says, carrying on without audio. I'm hoping you can hear. Message one of my team if you're having difficulties, James. All right, so has the poll gone down? And has the poll disappeared because I'm on one screen and not on the other? So I'm assuming it's disappeared for you.
Yes, I've taken it down. They might need to close it though.
Okay, so if it's still sitting there for you guys, do the cross, it'll disappear. So we actually polled 130 people on LinkedIn, and you can see that it was very, very similar to what you said there, although at that time people were saying that some more people said that their energy was lower than usual than have reported here. So it's interesting. But of course, if we are feeling sort of lethargic, we've got less energy, it's harder for us to be productive, it's harder to get up in the morning, it's harder to be motivated. And we know that some businesses are doing a brilliant job of managing productivity and supporting people remotely. Others are thinking about putting in surveillance and that sort of thing. And really, maybe the reason you guys are on here is about thinking at the root of the problem. The root may well be that person's well-being in the first place. Emily says she took up running, worked miracles. Absolutely, some endorphins. Good call. So I haven't done a poll on this, but I'm curious, guys. We went through lockdown in the summer. What do you think in the chat? How do you feel about going into autumn to continue a sort of hybrid working? Do you think that's going to make a difference to you? Personally, I'm a little bit concerned about it because I think the novelty of lockdown and during a beautifully hot summer that we had, and light evenings, light mornings, it was easier to get out with the dog in the morning and after work. As the nights draw in, do you think that's going to be something challenging, or have you got strategies? So Gillian's going to stay optimistic. It's about mindset. Are you going to have any strategies in place there to do it? Because obviously we've heard of seasonal affective disorder. We know that is a thing where people can naturally feel slightly more depressed as we go into autumn. So again, this is how can we be proactive about managing those things. So I can see there's other challenges there, and Helen's saying make time to get out in the daylight. That is something that we've definitely looked at in our organisation. With my team, I have really emphasised to people that it's not about presenteeism between 9 and 5. I want people to feel they can do their job within a 12-14 hour period and really prioritize getting out there in daylight, because well-being is important. Absolutely. Helen's walk the dog midday, get out and run. How can we maybe just empower people that they don't need to sit at their desk, which means that they're not even walking to the tube in daylight? It's actually, how do we encourage them to utilize that fresh air and feel that they get up and move? Because exercise is one of the key traits of these things, getting people to feel a bit brighter. So some nice ideas going into the chat there. So the point here is that we know there's 50% of people professionals feel that we need to keep an eye on this and we need to deal with this proactively, which is of course why all of you guys are on this call. Whether or not attrition and absenteeism will increase, I think that depends on how well we work our remote workers, because many of them being able to work remotely, you don't have to go off sick, they can keep on working, but we want them to be at an optimal level and be as productive as possible in the hours they work. So we've all the way through, we've wondered about what do you think putting your, thinking about your team. We've got a second poll here, which is if you think about what people might be worrying about now, because generally it's the worries that create issues, if you like, of these options here, and if you think I've missed one, please feel free to put it in the chat. Do you think that people are, if they're having to come back into the office, are they worried about safety of the workplace or commute? Are they fearful of losing the ability to work remotely because people are wanting to bring them back into the office? Or are they fearful of isolation? You can go for more than one, I think, on this one, can't we, Helen? So perhaps choose your top 2 or 3 is what I would suggest. Yes, you can
go for more than one.
Yeah, so choose your top 2 or 3. So you don't have to limit yourself to those. What sort of things for your population do you think they're worrying about? Because, of course, if we think about what they might be bothered about, maybe we can think about how we can support them. There's some great ideas in here. There's so much good content. We'll try and curate this, but do keep an eye on the chat there. So someone's sharing a nice thing about charity miles and things like that. Some lovely chats. Keep on voting, 71%. Awesome. Okay, I mean, nearly 80%, and then we'll close it. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. So still interestingly, safety. And those was, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, isn't it? 1960s motivation theory. Safety, personal safety is the top. People are not going to be productive while they're fearful of their safety. It's just a fact. And therefore, that's the challenge, isn't it? Do we have to force people back into a workplace? And how can we enable them to work remotely or to feel safe in the workplace? So that is a top fear. But equally, there are people. I saw something, in fact, I posted on LinkedIn. I have to post that out. Posted it last week. Perhaps we can put that in the email that goes out to people, Caitlin, the LinkedIn post that I did last week. There's some stats in there which were saying that everybody preferred work or got preferred working remotely, but it depended on the age group as to how much more they did. And I think it was the sort of people in their 40s that would be happily, on the whole, would be happy carrying on working remotely indefinitely. And it's the younger people that were wanted to get back and socialise, which completely makes sense logically to me. But there's some good evidence on that. It was good stats that the data was out on that. So if you want to see that data, we'll put that link into the email that comes out to you from my colleague Caitlin. But there's quite a mix here. Not surprising, people are worried about job security, and a high amount of that we know, and they were worried about that pre-lockdown. Carrying responsibility, the childcare thing is tricky, isn't it? Because at short notice, kids are being sent home from school, having to isolate. So we've got to be really flexible as employers, and we've got to be sensitive to the individual's situation, I think. And then on top of that, if they don't feel trusted to perform, or they haven't got the tools to perform, then it's really, really tricky. So that's interesting, isn't it, as what people are concerned about. Makes complete sense, and it's a mixture of concerns, and I guess that's going to depend from person to person. Is there anything that people are concerned about that we hadn't got on that list? I'm interested there. Susan's saying related to the commute. Yeah, it's getting to work, especially if you're in a city, I'm sure, places like Manchester and London and stuff. If there's any other thoughts on what people might be concerned about or topics, let me know, because I might not have thought of everything there. So the reality is, sorry, again, I get a bit click happy with my sensitive mouse there. The thing to remember is it's really easy to feel like we haven't got any power as line managers, because you can't actually fix the commute, can we? We can't fix whether their children are being sent home from school or their parents have just been diagnosed with COVID. You can't actually do anything about that. But what we can do, the one thing we can all do as human beings and as line managers, is empathize. And it's interesting because quite often we feel powerless, and you don't think that empathizing and listening to somebody is doing anything, but actually it's really, really valuable. If you've ever come across the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, he talks about listening and understanding is about emotional oxygen. And that's what you've got to think about it as. So even when you feel like you can do nothing, if you think about someone who's grieving, and it's easy not to know what to say, but actually listening to them if they want to talk, they appreciate that. We've all had it where someone has let you say how you feel and vent, and you feel like a weight's been lifted off you. So it's helpful. You can't fix it, but it's helpful. And always remember that, however frustrating it might be. But in terms of practical things that we can also do, I've got some wellbeing tips that we can follow. So as I've seen a number of you out there are already a heads up with this one, keep active. We know it's about endorphins and also getting outside. So if you can encourage people, including yourself, to be active, and it doesn't have to be running, it could be walking, getting out with an animal, but actually doing something in the outside, getting a bit of vitamin D, that is a really key thing. So at least once a day, getting out and doing something physical. The second thing is, of course, is eating well and keeping hydrated. And it's funny, isn't it? Because when we're at home, in theory, all of those things are at our fingertips, yet it's very easy to remain glued at your desk, especially if we've got into this habit of back-to-back Zooms. In fact, I feel like I should add this to the list. Remember, when we were in an office, people would talk about the cost of meetings, and we were all stuck in meetings all day, and what was the actual value and when did you get some work done. It does feel that some people have now got to the point where they're in that position with Zooms. So they're in back-to-back Zoom meetings all day, or goodness gracious, I heard of somebody who'd had a 2-day training course literally just converted onto Zoom. No change of the context or the material or the delivery. It was just relayed over Zoom. I mean, seriously. So, sorry, that was slightly going off the track, wasn't it? The point of that was, if we eat well and keep hydrated, we need to remember to go and get our water bottles, which has prompted me. I've got coffee and my water bottle isn't here. It's normally on my desk. And make sure we've got really nutritious soup in the fridge or whatever it is that's going to keep us feeling nourished, because there's a really strong school of thought that nutrition and our mental well-being are linked. And if we are at home, as long as we don't feel so depressed we can't get things in and make things for ourselves, then actually we've got a really good opportunity to look after ourselves. Stimulants such as alcohol, caffeine and nicotine, we know that again, that's easier for us to rely on those things when they are easy to access in place of the healthy things, so encouraging those. And of course those actually link into prioritise quality sleep. If you have too much caffeine or alcohol, that means we don't sleep as well. I heard some real things about lockdown dreams. If people are anxious, it's harder to sleep anyway, so we need to think about how we can reduce our stress, really focus on our sleep. And again, hydration and exercise and minimum stimulants actually will help our quality sleep. Encourage people to take real breaks, change the activity, change the scene, get away from their desk. As you would do in an office, you would get up and go to the kitchen and the coffee machine and have a chat with somebody here and there. You might even pop out to get a sandwich somewhere, and you'd be getting some change in and out in terms of the start and end of the day. Somehow people can almost be so, if they're those people that we said we were worried about, people wanting to demonstrate productivity, that could almost be counterproductive. They're so desperate to demonstrate productivity that they won't leave their desk. And we've all had it. Sometimes you sit at your desk and it's just not happening. It's taking ages to write that presentation or that article or whatever it is that you're trying to do. It's just you're not in the flow. Sometimes it's really good, and we can encourage our people to just say, if it's not working, go and take a complete break and then try it later. And again, that does link into sleep and how refreshed we are. How can we have social contact that doesn't always have to be video on? We can chat with people in other ways, but keeping that sense of team, that social contact, is it through collaboration technologies? Is it through are people able to get together physically? I saw something on LinkedIn about people talking about a walk, an all walk, I think they talked about, but basically, socially distanced, but if you're in the same vicinity, and this could be done in organizations between, let's say, a senior colleague and a junior colleague, so that actually getting the opportunity to physically go and have a conversation and still meet people. Being kind to yourself is about allowing yourself to do things that you're good at and you enjoy. So all of those things you can control here. Then it's about encouraging people to talk about how they feel, making that time. If you're a line manager, it does mean that we need to allow people to, maybe if we have one-to-ones, we still need to have these one-to-ones, these meetings with people, and take that time to talk about how we feel. It's different from being in a workplace where we might be able to pop in and say, hi, how's your weekend, as you went past. That's not necessarily happening. So you need to make sure we invest some time in understanding where people are mentally when we're talking to them. If we need help, let's shout, let's ask for help, let's not sit and suffer in silence. And then I think certainly reducing social media can be an important one. Certainly I felt it was at the peak of lockdown, where we were bombarded with negativity. So it's not a bad thing to do. So those are some 11 tips. I'll keep an eye on your chat. There's so much I want to get to look at, but I won't be able to read the chat and keep going to time. So you can look at that at the same time. I'll check it in at the next poll. So these are things to get you to, just warning signs for people when you are working with individuals. What might be a warning sign for a drop in well-being in someone in your team or yourself? So it might be lack of contact with others. They might have gone really quiet remotely. You're not hearing from them. You haven't seen them put anything in your Slack or your whatever your team collaboration, your Teams, Microsoft Teams, or we use Skype. The other thing you might find is they're finding it hard to, it seems like they're procrastinating. There's a tough job that needs to be done and they're not doing it, and they're putting it off, it seems. or conversely, they might be working chaotically. Now, in fairness, both of those might be to do with a lack of clarity. Maybe they've got too much on, or they don't know how to start something, so it could be dealt with through objectives or a one-to-one. But if that's out of character for that person, then you might think, okay, that's a bit of a strange sign in terms of how they're behaving. Often you hear people talk about being drained or tired, or things like, so the second to the bottom, aches and pains, headaches, other ailments. Those are often symptomatic of something that's bigger that's going on for people. Also, you might see these people working really long or unusual hours, which is interesting. And I'm just seeing Joe saying about send and delay emails. I think that's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because the benefit of working from home is that sometimes you can get up in the middle of the night and work on something. If you're not sleeping and you get something done, and that's fine if it works for you. It's less fine if sending an email to someone at 3 o'clock in the morning makes them feel stressed because they think they've got to respond. And so Joe said send and delay emails. If you are working at odd times, maybe setting them to go within the working day is a considerate way of doing that. You might see that people are taking too much on. Maybe they're timekeeping's poor, they're late onto things all the time, or they're not delivering stuff on time. Lack of or over enthusiasm. I mean, all of these really, you can see it could be any of these could be drops in well-being, couldn't they? Any of them might be. And the real key point to take from this is knowing your people. If you know your people, then you're going to know what the issue is, because the change is, it's a change from the norm. There's no substitute for knowing our people, how they operate normally. And then, of course, you might spot something. Going back to our analogy of walking around the black hole, you might spot them and be able to help them navigate their way around before it's too late. So again, back to you guys. So knowing yourself is as important as any other. Sorry, I'm trying to use my mouse to do it and it's a bit too sensitive. I'll try and use the up and down arrow. So here we go here. What would be the most visible sign of stress for you? And you can, again, multi-choice. You can do more than one on here if you want to. So the poll is coming up any minute now, I think. Thanks, Helen. So you do your poll, so you can choose more than one. If you want to, you choose your option. I'm just having a quick scan through. Okay, so Anth has said, I took on my role in May and I've only met my team remotely, so it's very difficult to know them. Isn't that true? Yes. So how can you get to know? Suggestions for Anth. I've got some ideas, but anyone got suggestions for Anth? We're recording it, so don't worry. What would you suggest that he could do to get to know his team in this context remotely? I'll just let a few more of you vote and then we'll sort that. I like the fact that we've got up here a Wellbeing Wednesday, encourage people to take a real break. I think do that every day of the week. And Cooper blocks a whole day every week in their diary to be free of meetings. Doesn't always work, but helps you get on with stuff. I think that's a really, really good call. Deborah says she forgets everything when she's, yes, in that situation. I completely understand that. People become cynical, absolutely. So, and it's just for you, I would say things like, so someone's saying you could block time out to do a team building activity, put some non-team workouts, some lovely suggestions coming through. And Barbat saying, try to have a one-on-one with your team and ask non-related questions you're interested to know about them. Absolutely. Book one-to-ones with them, I would agree. Because I think there's something about the social stuff that's all really nice. But if you're a new manager, there's nothing wrong with doing a Zoom one-to-one and saying, please tell me how you like to be managed. Ask them. You know, your container says, what is a sign for me that you are, you know, what's the best way I can manage you? And also, what's the worst way I can manage you? When do I know if you're under stress? And how would I know if you need my support or pressure? So actually just ask them. They might not even have ever been asked. And I think that's one of the best things that any new manager, whether you're face-to-face or not, is how do you want to be managed? And how can I get the best out of you? So I would really recommend you talk to them. So let's have a look at the results here, and we can see that being irritable or emotional is the top one. The interesting thing about that is we usually take that out on our family, don't we? They tend to see that first. So then other things, we might see lack of productivity or focus. So we become a bit scattergun, a bit all over the place, maybe withdraw. So we're a bit hard to get a hold of, we're quite quiet, start making silly mistakes, long hours. There's a whole mix actually. So generally it'd be the grumpiness. I think the interesting thing for me is whether we see that at work all the time. Sometimes we save, particularly remotely, it's our nearest and dearest that get the pain of that. So thank you for taking part in that. Some more tips now for you. So if you want to help your people, these are the things I believe we can do as a line manager. So be available, not 24/7, but tell them when you're available. And part of being available might be about scheduling in one-to-ones and team meetings and honouring them in the same way as you might have done in your workplace. Or actually, maybe you didn't do it in the workplace because you were around all the time, they could knock on your door. What you need to do now is schedule regular one-to-ones where you are available for people. Appreciate we've all got our day job to do, but actually that is a great example of prevention. If we don't invest in talking to our people, then issues build up. The second one is being prepared to share our own personal struggles, and being open. If you're finding it a bit hard, let's not pretend, we're all learning together. And I think sometimes it really helps if you say, I'm finding it really hard at the moment, because that means people feel able to open up. Ask people how they're feeling. Make sure you've got enough time to listen to the answer, and empathize. Ensure that people have clear goals and they know what their priorities are. So if they're not being productive, then maybe it's about, hang on a minute, I noticed you're working on a number of things. What do you think your priorities are right now? And make sure that they have those clear agreed goals and you trust them to deliver against them. Of course, come back and talk to them if they're not, but don't micromanage them. Agree the goals, agree the timescales, recognize achievement when they deliver them. And if for some reason they're not, ask with an open mind, what happened? What are the reasons behind it not actually happening at the moment? So good practice performance management. And all those areas there, we've got tips on that podcast that I was talking about and also in our book. Avoid encouraging presenteeism, which is about a 9-to-5 approach or timesheets. I think it's counterproductive and really old school. So if you can avoid that, I don't think you're going to get anywhere. I think you're going to get far further by saying, I trust you to get things done. And by the way, I really want you to look after your well-being. So get yourself outside, have some fresh air. And in the same way, encourage people to set and own their outputs and their timescales, their working hours within reason, right? They've got to be available when you need to get hold of them. But we don't need to micromanage, and give permission for people to be adults and stop and take a break when needed. And I think you'll find that the trust that comes back, just put yourself in the position, if someone does that to you, you're going to really want to do your best, aren't you? If they're not telling you when you've got to deliver, then you're really going to want to perform because you appreciate that flexibility, particularly with the other challenges that people have got going on. And then if we think about ourselves sort of taking a chunk up as leaders in our organizations, how can we influence well-being at an organizational level? Well, we can look to our peers and ask for other people to be open about mental health. Maybe you could work with other colleagues to make that acceptable, if you like. If there is issues around change, so I know furlough's not furlough anymore from the end of this month, but whatever it might be to do with organizational restructures, even when you don't really know what's going on, uncertainty is the issue that people worry about. So even if you're the most certainty you can provide is saying that we will give you a clear answer on what the structure looks like on the 1st of November, or right now, this is what I can tell you. So focus on what you can tell people as opposed to where the uncertainty is. How about listening mechanisms? Have you got your pulse surveys working? Is it about refreshing those, see how people are doing? Other listening mechanisms to keep the sense of how the organisation is feeling. Make it okay to talk about feelings on meeting agendas. Have rolling meeting agendas about how we feel. Walk your talk. So if you're telling them to go out for a walk, make sure you're not the one at your desk all day, every day. So, it's acceptable for you to be out, maybe going for a dog walk and having a one-to-one with somebody. How we can multitask in ways like that. And that's actually modelling healthy behaviours, in my view. How can you also think about making sure that you're measuring outputs rather than hours? So that culture about outputs, and that means as coaching people, is about giving people clear goals and objectives, but also coaching them as to how they're going to achieve those outputs and holding themselves accountable against them. I've seen some lovely ideas on wellbeing incentives. There's a few ideas up here that people are doing in terms of fun around wellbeings. So those sort of activities. Interesting. How can you think about people who are isolated in a role? So how can you maybe become part of a virtual team in terms of that? Because that's really tricky if you feel like you're isolated in a standalone role. And then also make sure that there's a safe escalation route. So if you've got things like mental health first aiders or outside mental health support, make sure people are aware of where they are, how they can access it. And educate other managers, educate staff as to how we can promote wellbeing. So those are my thoughts now, and I say we'll provide you with the slides of the things that we've shared. Thank you. There's been so many fantastic ideas coming through here, and I will be wrapping up shortly. Just in terms of these things here, what do you think you're going to do? What would you potentially be happy to take on? What are the actions do you think you might take away from here? And in fairness, they don't have to be actions that I've shared with you. If you've seen some great suggestions on the chat, then take the suggestions from that, because this is a brilliant way to share information, and we'll definitely try and find how we can curate this into content that you can utilize, because I think it's really valuable. So interested to see what you think your takeaways are. Here's some more resources that you can access, and the links will be there for you. So we've got blogs on this. We've got infographics that you can share about boosting energy. Again, if you want to circulate things, podcasts that can be helpful for people that they might want to look at. My screen sharing is paused. I'm not quite sure I did that. I think it's back. So various resources is what we've got here. Some of the ideas there you've got from other people. Mindful Employer was recommended on one of the previous webinars we did on this. Some other things which people said here, which they had a telephone tree of buddies. So maybe as we go into winter, you could have a telephone tree of wellbeing buddies, which is quite nice. Desk yoga, we've got lovely ideas here. So guys, I know lots of you got to disappear. We will record this for you. For those of you who could just stay on for a couple more minutes, I wondered if you'd be prepared just to do some quick fire polls, which are going to help us have information that will help us do future webinars like this. So if you are there, this will just take about a minute. I've got 3 quick questions. Oh, if I can hit them up there. So the first one, we'd like to know, and you can answer more than one answer to this, what do you see over the next 6 months as a manager is your biggest challenge? And you can choose 2 or 3 of these if you are able to. It's up there. We'll just keep it moving pretty quickly for you. I think all 3, in fact, are on this same stream. So this data is really helpful for us, because what we can do is, as I say, use this as data to prepare the future relevance of our future webinars, basically. So do you see that it's about staying connected with people? Do you think it's about keeping people focused? Is it going to be about managing morale or energy? Is it about productivity? I'm seeing that slightly different in terms of people's work rate, as opposed to them knowing what's clear, which is the focused one. Do you think you've got performance issues you're going to have to deal with? Is it going to be actually managing yourself, or is there something else that you think that you need to do there? So ping those answers on here. That would be really, really helpful for us to get that data. Thank you so much. Brilliant stuff. And then some of you have gone to the second one. What are the main topics? I'll just go into my slide because you've managed to go there. Oh, sorry, I apologize for my slide control through this webinar. It just seems to be a bit sensitive. So which of the following topics do you think managers need more support on? Because this will help us work out what we need to put into our webinar program. So let us know which topics you think you need more support on. So those are the things we've thought of. Again, put in the chat if there's something missing, then that would be really appreciated if we've not thought of something. And then if you were using tech, did you use it more during lockdown? And it was used for structure. Was it the same? Did you use it less? So actually we're using other ways of using it. I'm talking about HR tech as opposed to collaboration. I know we'd all been on Zoom or Teams. So more if you've got performance management software or an HR system, we're using it more or less, or actually you don't have it. So that was the third question. So I'll just put the final slides up so you've got more connections here. We've got our webinar series. that you can follow, look up for future webinars. We'll send this out to you because I know lots of people need to disappear. We've also got an ebook that we'll send you linked. In fact, we'll send that to you. And if you or any of your team are interested in virtual management training, as in live training through this sort of format, it'll be someone like me, well, it probably will be me actually, running these. I'm running a series of training sessions aimed at line managers in November onwards. So we'll send you details of that in there. So there's so many great ideas. We'll grab as much as we can in the chat box. Those of you who are still there, which actually there's quite lots of, it's over 100 people still here. Thank you so much for listening. I've just made it on 40-ish minutes. I think the content of the chat is absolutely fantastic, so I'll have a little read back. If anyone has got any specific questions that they'd like me to answer, I'm happy to stay on for the next 2 or 3 minutes. If you need to disappear and get food, please do. And I say we'll send you everything through so that you can make maximum use of this. Really appreciate you joining. I'm just going to keep an eye on if there's any questions. Thanks for joining, Mark. Caitlin's just put the link to the management training if you want to know more on that. Oh, good, Vicky. That's great. So you're going to go use it, are you? How are you going to use it if you're still there? Are you going to run it out for your managers? Have you got a project you've got to deal with? Thank you, Paolo. Ah, fantastic. Perfect. Well, we've got absolutely oodles of resources, Vicky. So if this is your first time, have a look at the previous webinars that we've run as well. And lots of it are, lots of it's L&D and there's white papers, all sorts of stuff, resources on the Actus website. So there should be lots of content you do. And actually, keeping on the future webinars, we're going to do the next one's about building a learning culture. Thanks, Caitlin. Brilliant. Okay, so thank you so much, guys. I'm going to close down the meeting now. I'm just going to give my guys chance someone to grab all of the chat.
Yeah, I was just about to ask one extra second.
Yeah, no, don't worry. I won't close it. I won't close it because I think it's harder to get it, isn't it? We've got screenshots of the polls, haven't we? And I think if we can grab the chat and let's have a think about how could we curate, I guess, some of the ideas. Maybe we can put it into a blog or something because there's some really fantastic content that we could put in and send out to people. Don't worry, Jamie, we've recorded it. So if you want to catch up on it, you can watch the recording and also we'll send you out the slides anyway.
Yeah, I've got all the polls and I've saved the chat as well.
Got that. Does it come out in the background? Is it you saved it in the background, have you?
I think so, yeah. It should save anyways because we recorded it.
Yeah.
But I just saved it just to make sure we have got all those great ideas
yeah, exactly.
down.
There's lots of it, isn't it? Fab. Okay, so we can close with confidence. I will stop sharing. And I'm going to end the meeting.